Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of the Rotoworld Basketball Show. I'm Raphielle Johnson, joined as always by Noah Rubin. We were without Dan Titus at Yahoo Sports this week. He's a bit under the weather. Get well soon, Dan. And he will most likely be back next week for our post-trade deadline show. Noah, how's everything going this Wednesday?
It's going pretty well for me. Halfway through the week, it's already been, a pretty busy week from both a game and a news standpoint. As far as Dan, we're trying to keep him on the shelf with the trade deadline coming up. Don't want to mess up his trade value at all.
Exactly.
So just want to make sure he's healthy in case we need to make a move there. But we'll be excited for Dan to come back next week, assuming he's feeling better. But yeah, it's been a good week so far. Should be a fun rest of the week based on the way the news is already coming out.
Yeah, unlike some players who have been rumored to be on the trading block, he doesn't need to be showcased. So we're going to hold him back for a week. But let's get right into it. Obviously, on Monday, the Heat announced before their game that Jimmy Butler was suspended indefinitely. That's at least 5 games. That will run up through the trade deadline. Obviously, we both said it. He's likely played his last game in the Heat uniform, regardless of what happens. How do you kind of assess this situation in Miami, and who do you think fantasy managers should kind of be targeting, even though we probably already know some of these names right now?
Yeah, I think I actually kind of want to stretch things a little bit, maybe look at some under the radar targets because the obvious guys that we've talked about, Nikola Jovic, Jaime Jaquez, Duncan Robinson played pretty well, but what happens for Jimmy Butler to get traded? I don't think the Heat are going to take back a million picks to make that happen. They're probably going to want players to keep them competitive. They've mentioned a couple of teams, the Warriors, the Timberwolves, the Sixers, who knows where he's going to end up. But if it's Golden State, do they send back 3 or 4 younger guys to try and make this thing work? Do we see, it may be like a Moses Moody or like a Brandon Pajemski. I don't know which this is relation. But it could be somebody like that sees a much larger role with the Heat than they have in Golden State's, I guess, sporadic lineups this year. So I think it's kind of hard to say because players will be coming back and we don't know what team is trading for Jimmy Butler. Obviously the best case scenario for some of these guys like Jovic and Jaquez would be for Jimmy Butler just be suspended the rest of the season and not get traded because that's plenty of usage for them. But if we're assuming that he's going to get traded and they're going to be bringing back more players to enter this rotation, I wouldn't hate looking to sell high on guys like Jovic, Jaquez, even Duncan Robinson if you can, trying to sell somebody else on the idea that, this guy's probably going to play 35 minutes a game the rest of the year, and then maybe it changes in about a week.
Yeah. No takebacks.
Yeah, no.
No. Yeah, what I would note, that's something I've read in various reports about this, is that the Heat are preferring not to take back players who have contracts that run past the 25-26 season. So they're really valuing the financial, I don't know if freedom is the right word for that, but they want a little bit more flexibility to make this type of move happen. Maybe they come down off of that stance as we get closer to the trade deadline, but it seems like they've already made some concessions in terms of what they want in return. I think the financial key is going to be something to watch here. In terms of the Warriors, some of those guys you bring up, I think Moses Moody, I don't believe, he's extension eligible after next season. But you've got a few guys like Pajemski's still on a rookie deal. Dennis Schroeder is going to be a free agent this summer. Same with Gary Payton II. So I think they may have some contracts that can make it work in terms of giving Miami what they want in terms of guys who may come off the books in a year or two. That said, Miami's never been the type of franchise that would outright tank. So there's also the desire to get some value in return. So it'd be interesting to see what they work out there. Philadelphia, I don't know how that would work, in terms of the pieces that they'd receive in return. Like, why would Miami want, say, Paul George or, Joel Embiid? Because I kind of feel like they're not going to part with Tyrese Maxey, and you may have to move one of those other high-priced guys to get Jimmy Butler back in there. And I don't know if Jimmy Butler would even want to go back to Philly. So, it's going to be an interesting situation. Good thing we've got a little over a week to kind of figure this all out. But, my man did not want to come off the bench. Despite being suspended twice, he felt he was still a starter. I get it, but I also get Miami deciding, you know what, no, we can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
So moving on, another interesting report. De'Aaron Fox, his time in Sacramento could potentially be coming to an end soon here. There have been reports of the Kings exploring different trade offers for him. Still hasn't signed an extension there, which is, you want to cover yourself in terms of talent and then the talent loss potentially and then financially as well. But San Antonio is a name that's come up quite a bit. I wonder why. They seem to have a young player there that a lot of people want to play with.
Yeah, they do. I think it. I don't blame anybody for wanting to play with Devin Vassell because he's a very exciting young up and coming player in the league.
Yeah.
No, obviously it's a number of players are wanting to be the point guard with Victor Wembanyama for the rest of their career. I think it'll help them a lot. I think everybody kind of is expecting the Spurs to be one of the best teams in the league over the next 10 years as long as Wemby's there. We'll go into talking about the Hawks here in a little bit, but they have control over the next 3 Atlanta firsts. This year it's unprotected this year and in 2027, and it's a swap in 2026. So they have plenty of ammo if they want to make a trade for De'Aaron Fox, or they also don't have to, and they'll still have a chance to add plenty of talent over the next few years. So yeah, I think it's, they can make a pretty competitive team pretty much immediately. They could obviously make other moves at this deadline to speed up the timeline. They're just outside the play-in right now, but if you're trading for De'Aaron Fox, then you're probably going to be able to pass the Kings, and who knows, maybe a couple other teams kind of at the bottom there. So it could be an exciting trade deadline if a move like this ends up happening, but we'll see.
Yeah, I think with San Antonio, you're looking at Vassell and Stefan Castle as guys that if they're to make a move for De'Aaron Fox, maybe you have to part with one of those guys, because I'm assuming that Sacramento would want a young guard in return as part of the haul for De'Aaron Fox. So I think it's something to watch there. In terms of the Kings, I don't really think you're looking at too much beyond Keon Ellis in terms of fantasy possibilities in the short term if he's moved by the trade deadline. Malik Monk, he's already kind of taken off in terms of his rostership. That'll probably jump even higher if a move is made. But this feels like a trade that ultimately gets made in the offseason for me. You haven't had the issues that Miami's had with Jimmy Butler. So it's like I don't think they really have to rush in terms of getting something done. Just play it out, get to the offseason and reassess things there. So that's what I would say. But one question I do have, what does this do for the timelines of especially DeMar DeRozan? But you could probably throw Domantas Sabonis in there as well.
Yeah, and one quick thing before we talk about that, the Kings pick, the Hawks have that from the Kevin Huerter trade. It's a top 12 protected first. So they do kind of need to make a decision, like, are they going to just try and remain competitive? Because if they, feel like let's just try and do this thing and then maybe trade Fox in the offseason if he still wants out, and they lose the play-in or make it to the first round playoffs and lose there, it's like, okay, we have this, we don't even have our first anymore. Whereas if we trade Monk now, we can get more firsts and start to maybe have like a minor, I don't want to call it a full rebuild, but like a retooling finish to the season and add another potentially 2 lottery picks if depending on what they get back for Fox, and then try and continue this timeline around Sabonis and DeRozan, even though it would be like a 2 timeline thing, because those guys, I mean, Sabonis isn't old, but like DeRozan is kind of reaching the twilight of his career. So they're in a pretty interesting spot. I think they were, I guess, hoping that firing Mike Brown would kind of rejuvenate the team, and it did work for a little bit. And then now your star player's asking out. So obviously something else went wrong there. It's kind of a mess. They have pieces, and if they play things the right way, they could probably make things work out. But based on the history of the Kings, and honestly, just like it would take a very special franchise to be able to play this the right way to make it work out best. But I'm not optimistic that it's gonna work out well.
And then there's also the potential of unlocking Keegan Murray. Like, we've seen him take a hit in terms of his fantasy value, especially offensively this year. You move one of your big heavy usage guys, maybe that unlocks something there. depending on the return, obviously, but that would be something else to watch in terms of fantasy value if they were to trade Fox at the deadline here. And unfortunately, we will now move on to your Atlanta Hawks. Jalen Johnson, left shoulder, the reports didn't sound great in the days after that injury, and we found out why this morning. Chris Haynes reported first that he will undergo season-ending shoulder surgery. Man, this is a crushing blow for that team in terms of just actual basketball, but fantasy-wise, is there anyone that you're kind of looking at and making a step up here?
Yeah. I mean, in reality, it's kind of a detrimental thing for the Hawks. But I mean, if we're looking just the fantasy side of things, Mohamed Gay started in his place during last game. The last 3 games, I think it's been without Jalen Johnson. They've started Larry Nance at the 4. They started David Roddy at the 4, and they started Mo Gay. And he was the best option. Like Larry Nance really struggled as a starter. He had some good starts earlier in the year, but didn't really do too much. David Roddy was not a good option. And then I think he had 11 points. Mohamed Gay did 11 points and like 7 rebounds in 22 minutes. Like DeAndre Hunter's going to take on the extra minutes, but I think maybe it's just like a deeper league guy, or maybe this is just kind of like the best option possible. And maybe it makes more sense to look at a different team. But if we're looking in Atlanta, Mohamed Gay, I wouldn't be shocked if he just continues to start. Something there's like really a better option on the team right now because they're pretty, adamant that they want to bring DeAndre Hunter off the bench. But I mentioned earlier when we were talking about the Spurs, like that they have the Hawks first this year. So the Hawks aren't going to just all out tank. Like they're not going to really sell at the deadline unless they're getting first round picks back. So could we see them maybe get kind of like a little Band-Aid trade to kind of fix the absence of Jalen Johnson, maybe make them a little bit more competitive? It kind of scares me that a floor spacing 4 is kind of available at the trade deadline in the division. If they trade for Kyle Kuzma I could potentially, I don't think it's a great fit. I don't think it makes sense, but if it's either that or the guy we drafted in the second round last year, and you don't have your first this year, then I don't know. Maybe that's something that the Hawks end up doing. But right now it's kind of a crappy situation for them because they are not a great team when Jalen Johnson isn't out there.
Yeah, I think I'd add Vit Krejci in the mix too. So obviously he's been starting. Not too big on Zachary Risachet at this point. I think he's still got a lot of developing to do. So Mohamed Gay would be someone to watch for sure. I think he played 22 minutes. So that may be a slight concern, but that's a situation where, he could definitely be in the mix, as you say earlier. But enough of us talking. We have a special guest this week. It is Adam King of FBI Basketball. Adam, thank you for joining us. How you doing?
Good, mate. Sorry, I'm a little bit late. Yeah, we had an unexpected thing at about 5 o'clock this morning, a wake-up call that we weren't expecting, but and I didn't have my phone with me. We just had to run. So I'm here, and I can see you're talking about Jalen Johnson, which I just did a quick season.
You there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. The screen froze though. That's the only.
Okay.
I'm
here. I made it.
Okay. Yeah, you can hear you for sure, but you just aren't moving. But
okay, you guys are moving, and I can see me moving, but you can't see me moving. So
no. But yeah, if you want to.
It froze on a great picture of you, Kingy. So we're all good.
Nice. Okay.
Right. Yeah, if you want to give your thoughts on the Jalen Johnson situation in Atlanta, have at
it. How's Noah feeling? I suppose it's the question. Look, I guess the fact that we hadn't heard anything for was it a week? I don't know if it was a week, but however long it was pretty concerning. I think we were worried that this was. They were probably hunting for every second opinion that they could get to see if there was any other option. Look, I mean, Vit Krejci, I'm excited that he will get to play a bit more. I just heard you talking about Mohamed Gay, who started last night. Sort of intriguing, I guess. But for me, I think it's Veet. Shea will have to do a little bit more on a regular basis. We'll see. But Veet Krejci for me is probably the biggest winner here.
Right. Makes sense. All right, we're gonna have you jump out and then jump back in. See if we can fix the video portion.
Yep.
All right. Okay. He should be back shortly, but the next step is to talk about Anthony Davis. He exited last night's loss to Philly with an abdominal injury. He'll be out at least 1 week. I'm not too thrilled about the streaming options in LA. I'm not sure if you feel the same, Noah, but what do you make of this situation?
Yeah, so Dorian Finney-Smith started the second half in his place after AD exited in the first half. I assume that was more of a matchup thing because the Sixers obviously don't have like a true center right now. They're starting Yabusele. So maybe just having like a similar kind of like sized player made sense for this matchup. But I would assume that with Anthony Davis, I think expect to be reevaluated in about a week. So missing at least the next few games. I would assume that Jackson Hayes steps into the starting lineup. And maybe he has a little bit of streaming upside. I think Christian Koloko is going to see some minutes as the backup center, and then they probably will use this kind of small ball lineup with Dorian Finney-Smith and Rui Hachimura and LeBron. I guess it's not that small of a lineup, but no true center in there. Yeah. But I don't think I'd be rushing to add any of those guys. Like none of them were very productive against the 76ers last night. And, it's not like it was a tough matchup. Like Yabusele's playing phenomenal, but it's not like it was against like a true center that just dominated them on the glass. Like they should have been able to have some success. So I'd probably just be looking to a different team. Like none of these guys are exciting to me.
Yeah, they finished a week at Washington on Thursday and at New York on Saturday. I don't think I'm saying anything groundbreaking when I say the Saturday game is going to be more taxing than Thursday night. So, they probably get away with a combination of Finney-Smith and even Jared Vanderbilt for a few minutes at the 5, as well as Jackson Hayes. They can probably get away with that against Washington. Don't think they can against New York, but I agree with you. Like the streaming options without Anthony Davis just are not very good right now. So, you got 29 other teams to choose from. Probably better off doing that. Adam, we're just talking about Anthony Davis, his abdominal injury. What do you kind of make of that, and who are some guys you're potentially looking at as streaming options?
Yeah, I just saw that he's out reevaluated in a week.
Yeah.
I talked about this on my post-game show last night. There really isn't anyone in LA. It's just a whole lot of nothing. I think Jackson Hayes, I guess, is potentially the guy that will step in and start there, but I think they'll just go a bit more small and chop and change. And I wouldn't be surprised if Anthony Davis is out through the All-Star break here, because I think we've only got 5 games for some teams until that All-Star break, 6 games, something like that. So, I wouldn't be surprised if teams start to extend the injury, I guess, recovery times to give them that extra week. But it's going to be rough in LA because we saw last night losing to that Philly team was not a good sign of what things could look like without Anthony Davis on the floor.
And what I'd add about Christian Koloko, he's still on the 2-way. He's played 25 games already, so that may factor into their decision regarding his availability. But that's just not a good situation for them or people who have Anthony Davis roster at this point. Flipping over to Philadelphia, played last night without Paul George. He's dealing with a finger injury. They say he's day-to-day, but given the medical history this season, with him especially, this doesn't feel like it's going to be a day-to-day situation. Adam, how do you kind of look at things in Philly without Paul George? And could Ricky Council IV be in the mix as a deep league streamer here?
I think he could be. I'd prefer Justin Edwards based on sort of what we've seen. I think there was a game 2 games ago, something like Council is in and out of the rotation a little bit. So there'll be a game where he'll play minutes, and I think he did last night, but then the game before he didn't. But that's more on whether Paul George is available. So I think as long as Paul George is out, then yes, because it's not Kyle Lowry. It shouldn't be Eric Gordon. So I think both Edwards and Council are worth a look. And there hasn't been an update on Paul George, has there? It's sort of a day-to-day thing.
Yeah, day-to-day.
Yeah. So who knows what the Sixers are planning on here? Are they of the opinion that they're done for the season? I doubt it, but I doubt they're of that opinion. I think they are done, but they themselves, I don't know if they believe that. But yeah, in the meantime, I think Council and Edwards, believe it or not, are probably 2 guys we need to consider at least.
No.
Yeah, Council provided more scoring last night. Justin Edwards was kind of a little bit more well-rounded, pretty much doing everything except for scoring. Gotten some pretty good steals numbers recently. I think it's just kind of a difference, at least partially, in where they're playing in the lineup. Justin Edwards is playing with the starters, and Tyrese Maxey is by far their best scoring option, so they don't need Justin Edwards to even try and score as much. Ricky Council is a guy, I think, like starting last year, he's kind of considered as like a dynasty sleeper. I don't remember if I published him in any offseason columns or anything like that, but really like his talent. So it's kind of fun to see both of those guys getting the opportunity right now. But yeah, the Paul George, they're calling it an injury to the extensor tendon in his left fifth finger. And they're going to determine his return to play in the next few days.
Okay.
I don't know if you guys saw Zach Hanshu wrote a really great blurb headline calling him Pinky P. So I think we'll, he's always clever with the blurb headlines and the nicknames. So it's a left pinky injury. So hopefully it doesn't keep him out too long.
Yeah, I think one name I'd add for shallow leagues is Kelly Oubre Jr. 60% rostered, so he's going to be available in some of those formats. But yeah, Council, Edwards, that's about it in Philadelphia. And even those guys, I would say they're a bit of a reach in terms of must add at this point. So interesting times there. And obviously we've got a lot going on in the sports world. Week out from the trade deadline. Super Bowl starting to heat up here, a little over a week away. And with that in mind, you can watch the biggest names in sports talk, including Mike Florio, Dan Patrick, Dan Lebitard, and Matthew Berry, as they cover the biggest moments on and off the field each day on the NBC Sports Now channel. It's available on Peacock and free on most streaming platforms. Learn more at NBCSports.com/now. Right. So, we do our weekly buy or sell section, and I kind of wanted to bring up a guy who's been pretty hot recently in terms of fantasy value, and it's Jaden McDaniels in Minnesota. Top 15 and 8 and 9 cat over the past week, according to Basketball Monster. Top 10 and 9 cat, as a matter of fact. My question to you guys, do you buy him finishing the season ranked within the top 75?
You want to go, Noah, or you want me to take it?
Sure, I can go first. I think top 75 is pretty realistic. In 9 cat right now over the course of the season, he's 88th, and which has been obviously ascending with how well he's played recently. The main reason, there's a number of reasons for it. He's increased his rebounds. He's shooting the ball better, but he's for a few years now been considered one of the best defensive players in the league, but that hasn't always translated to really good defensive numbers. But that has happened recently. Over the past 2 weeks, averaging 2 steals and 1.4 blocks per game, career high 1.5 steals per game this season. So kind of seeing those things happen, like defensive numbers aren't usually, something that players can do consistently. It's one of the flukier stats, especially steals, but he is doing it, and he has been pretty consistent about it recently. So if he can keep that up, even if the shooting slows down, but if he can keep doing doing his thing on defense, grabbing some rebounds, then I think top 75 is realistic.
Yeah, I think I agree. As you said, he is one of these players that is where his real life game has certainly been far better than his fantasy game, and we've seen flashes over the last couple of years where he puts together a week of strong performances, and we go, okay, has he figured it out? Is he now someone we need to add and we need to hold? And I've talked about him quite a lot actually on my show, and the fact that this run that he's on now is probably the best in terms of sustainable production of his career. And he scored double digits 7 straight games. As you said, the steals and the blocks, he's sort of getting, I mean, he had 5 combined in the last game, 2, 7, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 5. So yeah, I think maybe he's not going to be as good as he's been the last 2 weeks, but top 75, I think he's within reach. As we know, anyone that gets above average defensive contributions is going to push up those rankings quite quickly. And an example of that. So I don't think he's available anywhere at this point, but I mean, maybe he is. I don't know if you have his roster numbers there, but I think if he's available, you have to go and add him. And if you've got him, just hold him and hope that this can maintain.
He's at 47% roster in Yahoo leagues right now.
Okay.
So yeah, standard leagues, you should probably be able to get on that bandwagon. I think what also has helped him, the Dante DiVincenzo injury. As you know, Mike Conley isn't going to provide much in the way of offense. Like, he can knock down some shots, obviously, but there's still going to be some room for Jaden to kind of expand a little bit, even with Anthony Edwards and Julius Randle in there. Like, I wasn't one who thought that would be the case when Dante went down, but things have kind of opened up a bit for him. So I think that's also going to help him, continue on this upward trajectory. We'll see when Dante comes back what happens there, but I think top 75 is certainly realistic for him this season.
Yeah, and as you said, Mike Conley is he doesn't look great.
Mm-hmm. He does what they need him to do, basically.
Yeah.
In terms of rookies, we're going to head back to Miami. We started the show talking negatively about Miami and the Jimmy Butler situation. A bit more positive, Kel'el Ware. Since moving into the starting lineup January 21st, he has been a third-round player in 9-cap formats. The partnership between he and Bam Adebayo seems to be working quite well from a production standpoint. So I'll start with you, Noah. Like, what do we make of Ware's move into the starting lineup? And do you think the production is sustainable? Not so much like third-round level, but could he be like a top 50 to 75 player for the rest of the season?
Yeah, I think it's great that he's finally getting the chance to start. I think that was not like a frustrating thing early on, but we were kind of expecting him to have a larger role pretty early on this season. Just didn't happen. So the fact that it is happening now, it's great for the Heat because it's been obviously a very frustrating, drama-filled season. So having their first-round pick play well, it's been great to see. I think top 50 is, that's what I'm expecting. Top 50 value for the rest of the season. He's been a pretty reliable source of threes, rebounds, blocks, shooting a high percentage. The steals numbers have been there over the last couple games as well. So yeah, I'm very excited. It's only been the 4 starts, like you said, but it feels like it's been more because he's had, I guess, a couple of other big games before that. At this point, I'd be pretty surprised if he didn't end up winning Rookie of the Year. I'm pretty sure he's the betting favorite now. I don't have those numbers up, but I remember reading
our producer says that he is. I'll let you guys talk first, but I have an issue with that. But keep going.
Okay. Well, perfect timing that he threw that out there. I didn't even notice that. And then I would say in this class, pretty easily a top 5 rookie from a dynasty perspective, potentially top 3 or even higher. And then maybe even, I think we talked about this a little bit yesterday, Raph, probably a borderline top 50 player overall in dynasty leagues. And I think it's pretty quick to say that. And I'll feel better about it when we get a larger sample size here.
Look, I think I'm pretty on board. I was relatively high. I think a lot of us were high on him coming into the season and took him as a last round kind of a flyer just in case, because he was very good in Summer League. He was very good in the preseason. We knew that with Bam there, he was not going to necessarily come in and play a big role, and that was the case. I think we all saw the opportunity for them to start Bam and Ware alongside each other because they do play different styles. But obviously they didn't, and they went with Thomas Bryant as the backup for the first month, and we had to drop Ware because he wasn't he was out of the rotation. So it was good when he moved when Bryant was traded. I think that was a really good indication that they were hedging towards running with Ware as the backup center. And then he, as Noah said, he played well for a few games before moving into the starting lineup. And now it's all systems go. And I think my only concern, I think he can be top 50 per game. My only concern are the minutes because we've already seen in the small sample size of 4 games, he played 40. Well, it was a double overtime game, but he played 43 minutes in the last game. He's played 36, 39, but he also played 23 minutes in a win over Brooklyn. So, and there were no foul issues or anything there. So there is still that, I guess, an indication that they're okay to run a bit smaller if they need to. But other than that, I think he's looked really good. So happy to roll him out. And if you manage to pick him up, then congratulations.
Yeah, I really like what he's done as well. But I kind of feel like him being the betting favorite off on the strength of like 2 weeks kind of says a lot about this rookie class and what they have done or haven't done to this point in the season. But more power to him. I guess my beef is with the odds makers more than anything. So, but that's what I said before. We talked about Jimmy Butler before. So I ask you, Adam, which player is more likely to get traded, Jimmy Butler or De'Aaron Fox by the deadline?
I think it might be Fox. I don't know. This whole Miami situation is, it's not unprecedented, but it's very Jimmy Butler. It's very on brand for Jimmy Butler. So I don't know. I know Phoenix are sort of there in the discussions, and there's other teams. And to me, I just don't know. If I was running an organization, I don't know if I'd want Jimmy Butler coming in. I know he's still a very good player, but I can envisage a situation where Miami just say, "Nah, stuff you. We are just going to keep you and not play you, and or force him out there or whatever." Where I think the De'Aaron Fox situation is at least somewhat amicable. I don't obviously they don't want to lose arguably their best player, but he's made it clear that he's not re-signing, but he's not forcing his way out the door like Jimmy. He's not doing interviews in a Bulls jersey and then wearing Phoenix Suns colored shoes and doing all of that stuff. So I think they'd probably both get traded. But I just think the Fox situation is probably one where both parties are working towards the same goal, where I'm not sure Miami and Jimmy Butler are on the same page or have been for a while. But we'll see, I guess.
Noah?
Oh, that's a good way to put it, and a good way of, I guess, thinking about the situation is that it may make more sense for the Kings, and it seems like they're more cordial with each other, I guess, as opposed to what's been kind of a petty war between Jimmy Butler and Pat Riley here for a couple weeks now, maybe. Yeah. I don't remember exactly how long it's been at this point, but and also, like you said, probably more teams are going to be interested in De'Aaron Fox. I think there was reports that there's already a dozen teams that have called the Kings about his availability, whereas Jimmy Butler, maybe the Warriors, who are desperate to try and get one more ring out of Steph, or the Suns, who, my goodness, it hasn't worked, so let's just keep throwing our draft picks around, and hopefully some of these old star players will click at some point. I could see a team being desperate to trade for Jimmy Butler, but there's a number of teams that would just love to have De'Aaron Fox on their team for the next however many years. I guess the only concern would be, is he going to re-sign with them, which could make a few teams reluctant to part with too many assets.
You both make good points. I kind of feel like the nature of the relationship between Fox and the Kings may be what keeps him on that roster through the end of the season. He hasn't taking like the figurative matches to the building, so to speak, and try to light shit on fire. Excuse my language, but like Jimmy, obviously we've seen all this. Like even started like last offseason was comments about the Celtics and the Knicks, and then Pat Riley saying if you didn't play, you probably shouldn't be talking about those teams, but it's over in some way. But yeah, but let's just move on to the rest of week 14. That's a horrible segue, but whatever, man. Everybody's going to play at least 2 games between now and Sunday. 14 teams play 3. My question for both of you guys, are there any teams that you like schedule-wise or streaming players that you may have your eye on for the rest of this week? And we can start with Noah.
Yeah, I think there's a couple light days with Thursday and Sunday both having 5 games, and there's only 2 teams that play on both of those days, the Cavs and the Grizzlies. So just one streaming option from both of those teams. Santi Aldama, probably a guy that's rostered in a good bit of leagues. I think his rostership percentage on Yahoo is in the 40s, and he's been awesome this season. So just getting more games on those days is going to be helpful. And then Max Strus in Cleveland has been starting recently. Karis LeVert's still out. Isaac Okoro's out. Dean Wade's out a couple weeks. So he hasn't been a great option, but we know that he is capable of being a standard league guy. And again, it's just to be able to maximize some games there. I would definitely take a look at both those guys.
Adam?
Yeah, I'm just pulling up the schedule here now just to have a look. And I think what we have to sort of keep in mind, there are a couple of teams here. So like Washington, Toronto, Brooklyn. No, not Brooklyn. Charlotte, who have 3 games. That doesn't necessarily mean their guys are going to play 3 games. We talked about Mark Williams on my show and the fact that he's out tonight and they then play a back-to-back later in the week. Yeah. So we may only get 1 more game of Mark Williams this week. So if we're looking at scheduling, that's something to factor in. But yeah, look, I think in terms of teams that I'm looking at, Charlotte are still one of those teams to look at for streaming because LaMelo, I mean, there's almost no chance that he plays this week, I don't think. So we can probably look at them. Dallas are still without Luka. They're still without Lively. So there's some value there. They play 3 games as well. I mean, there's teams. You guys have probably noticed it as well. There seems to be more teams this year where it's just really hard to pick from one night to the next who to target. There's value, but we don't know where it's coming from on any given night. Brooklyn are a very good example. They only have 2 games, I think. But the Grizzlies, the Warriors, these teams that run deep, anyone of about 8 players could step up and play 30 minutes or play 17 minutes. We just don't know. It's made it hard to target quite a few teams.
Yeah, I think 2 names I'd throw in for Charlotte: Nick Smith Jr. and Josh Okogie. They both feel pretty safe in terms of that Friday, Saturday back-to-back, playing both of those games. And in the case of Smith, this may be like early prep for post-trade deadline because Brandon Miller's done for the year. He's been starting. Hasn't been a great fantasy value guy, but I feel like the opportunity is such that you can excuse kind of putting him out there in your lineups. Okogie, I think maybe a bit more of a measured approach to adding him, but 3 more games in this week with that back-to-back, I think he's worth the risk right now. And Isaiah Collier, I know Utah only plays 2 more games this week, but he's been starting. I think he's a superior point guard to Keontae George when it comes to setting up other people. And I think that's something that's going to continue to show itself. So he's someone else that not just now, but even after the trade deadline, the All-Star break, he's going to have really, really good value, I think, in terms of fantasy league right now.
Yeah. George is. I think they want to move Sexton. Ultimately, I think they'd like Sexton to be gone so they can play Keontae off ball at the 2 a little bit. So at the moment, and Clarkson's there. He just returned as well. So that's another name to throw into that bucket. But Collier's really good in terms of facilitating. Scoring's a bit rough, but you're going to get that with a rookie point guard. So he's looked good.
Yeah. So we'll see if the Jazz actually make a trade.
Mhm.
I think that we've been wanting them to for a couple of years in a row at the deadline. Just
Yeah.
trade away these guys to contending teams and get something back. But they're like, nah, we don't like the offer we're getting. We'll
Mhm.
just hold, have this player have an injury that keeps them out for the final 2 months, and we're good. So hopefully something actually changes in the fantasy landscape, because also some of these guys could actually really help contending teams, and it'd be fun to see a guy like Colin Sexton back in playoffs.
Mhm. It's a good point.
I do wonder if John Collins ever unpacks, because he's on a team, but he's always on the trade block. So it's like from the moment he walked into Utah, he was on the trade block, and he was on the trade block in Atlanta for about 3 years. I wonder if he ever unpacks, or does he just leave everything in a box and hope that he lands somewhere?
He's probably got he's got to have an emergency bag.
Yeah, he must have.
But yeah. So yeah, you basically have 3 guys in that roster who probably need to be moved. Guys like Collier, Bryce Sensabaugh, Kyle Filipowski, they may have added value, later this season. So certainly something to keep an eye on. And something else to keep an eye on this weekend. Wolves and Aston Villa, Saturday, starts 12:30 Eastern on NBC and Peacock. Ollie Watkins and the Villains, they visit the Wolves, who are looking to stay out of the relegation zone. Again, 12:30 p.m. Eastern this Saturday on NBC and Peacock. And, we normally started doing this since we started doing our own top 200 8-cat rankings and provide some risers and fallers from week to week. My 3 risers were Norman Powell, Mark Williams, and Nick Richards. I think in terms of Williams and Powell, it was more of like kind of a market correction, so to speak. I think I had them both a bit too low compared to where a lot of other places have them ranked. So kind of moved them up. And Richards, the opportunity in Phoenix, has raised his value some, even if the production's been a bit up and down, so to speak. But he is averaging a double-double since moving to Phoenix. So you guys have any thoughts, any of those players and their fantasy values in short term or even rest of the season for those guys?
I think Mark Williams has been great. Like, he's been playing some of the best basketball of his career. And then my only concern now, because I would definitely have him, like, I think you have him around 60 now, which is, I think, is totally appropriate to where he should be. I just hope that Charlotte doesn't mess you up, because it's like, yeah, like that's where he should be ranked. But then Charlotte's like, actually, no more back-to-backs. And you know what? We're actually just not going to play him anymore. Yeah, he's done for the year. Sorry. I know, because it's a fair ranking, but then Charlotte's just going to be like, yeah, no, sorry, we don't agree. Nope, can't play him.
Yeah, I agree on Williams. He's looked really good. Tonight's game, Charlotte-Brooklyn, is going to be ugly. Nick Richards, I think, is an interesting one. I think obviously he is a riser because he's starting, and we didn't envisage that 2 weeks ago. I can't remember when he was traded, but yeah, I think people got pretty excited. He had that. Would he have 20 and 19 or something in a game? But then in that last game, he only played 20 minutes and had 7 and 6 or something. So a little bit like the Ware situation. Phoenix are talented enough that they can go away from him if they need to. So his value will be a little up and down. But I do think if we're looking on the plus side for Nick Richards, he's going to play every game. They're not. This is not a situation like Charlotte where they're going to rest him or anything like that. He'll be out there every game at least playing. So so I like both Richards and Mark Williams.
Yeah. I think in terms of Williams, what I will say is that I don't really see him being shut down outright just because of the lack of basketball to this point in his career. So that may be a reason for Charlotte to play him through. Now, back-to-backs are a different matter, but I think that may be a reason to kind of keep him out there. If not, I guess Moussa Diabate. I'm not really too fired up about that, but
we are.
Yeah. In turn, 2 guys I had. Come on, man. I love Taj, but they gotta stop rolling my man out there like that. Like that. But yeah, that.
If they don't, Tibbs will. So you better hope that he stays in Charlotte.
There we go. That's our big acquisition right there, Taj Gibson.
God.
They might. The Knicks might look to trade Mitch Robinson for Taj Gibson and send Mitchell Robinson to Charlotte so they can bring Taj in for 3 months.
I don't know if anybody's been ever been fined for like a transaction, but that would probably prompt it.
It'd be vetoed by the commissioner. Sorry.
Chris Paul trade all over again.
Taj Gibson, Chris Paul, same player. Yeah.
Two guys I had dropping, Giannis Antetokounmpo and Dyson Daniels. I think with Giannis, it's a matter of you're effectively punting multiple categories here. Like you expect the free throw percentage to be one that you're going to give up, 3-point numbers too, but the turnovers, I think that's been another issue for him this season. It's kind of limited his value, but Dyson Daniels, maybe he bounces back as a byproduct of the Jalen Johnson injury. But let's talk about Giannis here. Like he's someone who you look at as like a lock to be picked, like a top 10, maybe just outside the top 5, but he hasn't played to that level. Is there any concern about him in terms of fantasy for the rest of the season?
You can go ahead, Kingy.
Yeah, look, I mean, Giannis for me, he's someone that I never draft because, in my opinion, he always goes too high, and that is because of those pretty obvious flaws that there doesn't seem to be any indication that he is going to become this even average 3-point shooter. He talks about improving them, but what's he? He's at 60%,
58.3,
58.3, which is
nice.
Which is actually his lowest in.
Yeah.
I mean, I can only see the past few seasons here, but
It's
he's
his
lowest in
career.
the past few. Yeah. So all of that talk about improving, that sort of thing, doesn't seem to be happening. So he's not someone that I generally have anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, look, and because of that, his rank doesn't necessarily reflect his value. I mean, his rank for the season, he's around 80. And we know that he's not the 80th best player in fantasy, but I think that's fair. Yeah, look, I think people. I still get comments from people saying, "Oh, Giannis, he's like, well, he's been Giannis. If you drafted him, you should be prepared." But the turnovers have been a little high as well. So that's 3 categories out of the 9 that are well below average.
Yeah, I think it makes more sense to draft him. I mean, he's pretty much going middle of the first round the last few years. Makes more sense in like head-to-head leagues than in roto leagues. Because if you are having to really make up ground in 3 categories if you take Giannis in the first round. But in head-to-head leagues, I mean, if you draft him, you pretty much have to lean into punting 3 categories. I mean, I guess you don't technically have to punt threes. You can just get those later on, but you're pretty much going to have to lean into punting, turnovers, and free throw percentage. So if you've built your team right, then I think that, he can be a top 10 player in category leagues. But it does take a very specific build. And there's a handful of players that fit really well with him. I know I didn't get him in any actual leagues this year, but I'm pretty sure I got him in multiple mocks. And it's like going Giannis first round, Sabonis second round. You go Zion Williamson in round 5, which probably didn't work out very well. But it takes a very specific build to make Giannis, play to his ADP.
If you punt free throw percentage and turnovers, he's ranked 3rd according to Basketball Monster. So
there you go.
As Adam said, if you have a specific build in mind, you're probably fine. But if not, you've taken a few L's. And with that, we're going to move on to our final segment of the day.
We don't get to talk about Dyson Daniels. We don't get to. You're talking to the top 2 Dyson
I
Daniels.
I apologize. No, I made my point. I think he's going to end up rising back up because of the Jalen Johnson injury. But if you'd like to add something as our resident Hawks expert, you go right ahead.
Well, I think it's we have the 2. I mean, King is a massive.
I forgot.
Well, so,
he's an Aussie.
Yes. I mean, I think just having Dyson Daniels as a follow. No, I think he does get his 9-cat value probably looks a little bit better than his actual impact because his steals are just so much better than the entire rest of the league. But I think, like you just said, like with Jalen Johnson out for the year, his usage is going to go up. So we should hopefully see him continue to be better in other categories. Like he's been like pretty good in some other categories, but it's been mostly predicated on the steals. So yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we got our.
Right.
I want to get my chance to talk about Dyson Daniels.
All right, there you go. Anything to add, Kenny?
Oh, so much to add, but I won't add all of it. No, look, I think he will benefit from this Jalen Johnson injury, and I think we've already seen glimpses of it with his rebounding numbers. He's had 6 and 10 rebounds in the last 4 games. To me, he was always sort of this. Obviously, the defensive numbers, the steals specifically, were going to sort of inflate his value to some point. But I think the offense has come around nicely. He's shooting. I think he's at like 55% for the last 2 weeks, something like that. Where are we? Last 2 weeks, almost 54%. He's not going to score 17 a game, but if he can get 13 to 14 a game, the assists have been a little bit better as well. Obviously, Trey missed a game in there, which helps. But yeah, I think he's fairly safe. It's pretty obvious the impact he had, even in that Hawks game last night. When he decides to lock down, they basically, once Houston figured out who Dyson Daniels was guarding, which was Jalen Green, they just stopped giving him the ball.
Yeah. Good points made there. Okay, now we can move into our final segment of the show. We're gonna do something a little different. We usually compare 2 players, but this time we're gonna do trade deadline stash battles. Which would you prefer to have stashed for after the trade deadline? First options: Bilal Coulibaly or Shaedon Sharpe. Now I'll let you start, Adam.
Ooh. I mean, they're both. I guess the good thing about these 2 guys is they're both sort of what we could call active stashes. So they're both doing enough now to be rostered. They're not someone that we're just stashing away and hoping that they get a role because they have a role. I think I'll go with Shaedon Sharpe. I think just slightly. I think what we've seen from Coulibaly is probably what we get from Coulibaly. He's playing starters minutes. He's starting. Where Shaedon Sharpe, he was starting and then he was sort of 15 minutes, and then Jeremy Grant got injured last night, which was a good thing for fantasy. So I'm going to go Sharpe because I think there's more room for him to grow as we head into February, March, April, where I think Coulibaly is who he is, and he'll be a little bit up and down. Probably gives you more stats across the board, but in terms of upside, I'll go Shaedon Sharpe.
I'll argue the other side of it. I think both guys are worth adding, so there's no wrong answer here to me. Especially after the Jeremy Grant injury, I think both of these guys will be maximized once Portland moves off of their, I guess, scoring forward that is a little bit overhyped. I think it's pretty similar with Jeremy Grant and Kyle Kuzma. They just kind of need to, both teams kind of need to finally make the trade, but one way or another, I would assume that they're not playing much over the final 2 months of the season for their respective teams. So both those guys should play a lot of minutes. I think Coulibaly, just being a better defensive producer, better defensive player, just makes more sense in category leagues. Shaedon Sharpe tends to be a bit of a one-trick pony at times. He was able to do a little bit more last night. Got 2 steals in there as well, along with some rebounds and some assists. But I feel better about Coulibaly just in category leagues in general. So I'd lean Coulibaly.
Yeah. I guess I have to make a pick since you guys both picked different answers. I think I lean Sharpe. He's not a great defender, but I believe he's kind of learned the lesson. You get pulled from the lineup because you aren't playing defense. I think he's going to, be able to kind of pick up on that and pick things up on that side of the ball. May not translate into stats. I know he had the 2 steals last night, but I think I would lean Sharpe in this situation. I like his situation a little bit better than what's going on in Washington, because if they don't trade Kuzma, even if they put him on the bench for like most of the remaining games, I don't know, man. And also you have Kyshawn George, we'll talk about in a minute. You've got Bub Carrington. You've got Alex Sarr. You got a bunch of other young guys who are still trying to find their way as well. So I think Sharpe's in a little bit better situation, especially if we get more run with him and Scoot Henderson on the floor at the same time as we've seen recently with those guys coming off the bench. So I think I would go Sharpe in this one. The next one, I mentioned Kyshawn George. Either he or Nick Smith Jr. Who would you prefer to have? Noah, you go ahead and kick this off.
I'll take Nick Smith. I think both guys have started to play a little bit more recently, kind of entered that starting lineup. LaMelo's ankle injury is definitely a factor here for me. Nick Smith's already starting, but I think his usage is just going to go up with both LaMelo and Brandon Miller out. And Kyshawn George, I think, kind of like Coulibaly, needs Kyle Kuzma gone to really be maximized. He had some good games earlier this season with Kuzma out of the lineup. So I still think he's a fine player to stash, but Nick Smith is giving us more now, even it's been a little bit more inconsistent than it was or than I was thinking it was going to be. I'll roll with Nick Smith.
It's a tough one for me. I think I'll go Nick Smith. My gut says Nick Smith, and then I probably try to overthink it a little bit. So, yeah, I think if we get to the end of the season and sort of look at that last month, it wouldn't surprise me if Kyshawn George's rank is higher than Nick Smith because I think he has that defensive floor, and again they tend to inflate fantasy value. So that might be the situation, but I do think that Nick Smith has more offensive playmaking upside, especially if LaMelo does end up missing significant time or he misses some time here and then he'll probably injure his ankle again at some point. Vasily Micic is not great. I know he's going to start here, but he's not him. Like, he's not the guy that Hornets need out there. They would much rather have Nick Smith out there. Let's get a look at what he can bring to us. So I think, I think I'll go Nick Smith in that one as well. So no need for you to be the tiebreaker this time.
Yeah, Micic last start, 2 assists and 6 turnovers. That's not going to cut it. I think if anything, we may see more of KJ Simpson after the All-Star break. Their second-round pick out of Colorado. So, yeah, I agree. Those are really good points. The last one, I think this may be another toss-up. Yves Missi or Donovan Clingan? Adam, why don't you go ahead and kick us off?
I saw you'd done this one as well, and didn't help me with my prep at all. Again, my gut here goes Clingan, just because I think we've seen Missi as a starter. So I think we've seen best case scenario for him when all of the guys were out in New Orleans, and he was good. We haven't seen that from Clingan yet. We haven't seen him play as the starter, playing starters minutes. I guess the question for me with Clingan is, can he play starters minutes? Can he play 30-plus minutes? And he'll get blocks. He'll get big just because he's so big, and he'll get rebounds. But his offensive game is very raw. And I mean, there were some instances the other night when they played, and he had some looks from sort of within a few feet of the basket, and I think he actually airballed one of them. So he's the offensive upside is very limited, and they don't really utilize him. And hearing him talk, it doesn't sound like he cares at all about scoring. He wants to be an intimidator defensively. He wants to change the shots of other teams, that sort of thing, which is fantastic, but it doesn't sort of create a full picture as a fantasy asset. So I think I'll still go Clingan, just because I think we haven't seen the best of him. But of course we would need DeAndre Ayton to be injured or be moved or something like that. And Rob Williams is there as well. And I mean, we could do a whole podcast on DeAndre Ayton and what we think his future holds. But yeah, I'll go Clingan. I'll go Clingan slightly.
Yeah, I'll lean Clingan as well. And I think the reasons are kind of similar. I think that we haven't seen him as best, but when he has played enough minutes to make an impact, it's been pretty incredible. Like early on, within the first month of his rookie year, he had a 19 rebound game. He had a 17-12 double-double with 8 blocks in a game. And we've seen, the other reason is we've seen Portland tank. We've seen how they tank. They tank hard. They don't, mess around with things. The final, I don't know when it'll start. It could be the final full 2 months, could be the final month. They're just not going to play any players that they're paying a good amount. Like it's just me strictly guys they pick up on 2 ways or 10 days, and the rookies that they're trying to figure out, or the young guys are trying to figure out, is this a player, a part of our future? Like Shaedon Sharpe should still be fine, but it'll be Scoot Henderson and Donovan Clingan are going to be the focus, I would assume, of the final 2 months of the season. Like, how good are these guys? We just drafted them both top 10. How good are they? Let's figure this thing out. Whereas New Orleans, like, I'm not sure exactly what this looks like. Like, they're a talented team that has been awful, and you would assume that they're going to tank. But, like, what does that look like for them? Does that mean that they're going to give Yves Missi 30, 35 minutes per game? But even if that happens, like, how does that look for him? Like in their last game, and we talked about this yesterday, Raph, he didn't get a shot attempt. And like that's not been like a consistent theme for him this season. But is Zion Williamson just going to get shut down, or he going to still just like play basketball because he hasn't done that much recently, just trying to give him games here and there? Is DeJounte Murray playing? Because I mean, I would assume having him as a point guard versus other options would help Yves Missi out a little bit. So it's just very confusing in New Orleans right now, and I feel like Clingan is a safer option.
Yeah, I second those thoughts. So it would be a Clingan for me as well. I think we've gone on for a little over an hour. I think that's long enough. But thank you all for listening. Thank you to Adam King of FBI Basketball again for joining us. Adam, you got anything going on the website in the coming days here?
No, I don't think much happens on the website. B-Dub does that stuff.
Okay.
I think he pops up all the links and things like that to the show. So, I mean, the show, 2 shows a day I'm doing at the moment. 3 actually for the next few days because I've got extra stuff. Trade deadline show coming up next week with Dan Besbris and myself. Bit of writing here and there, stuff on X and Blue Sky. So it's just business as usual as we head to what will, fingers crossed, be an interesting trade deadline.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks again for joining us. I'm Raphielle Johnson, Noah Rubin. As usual, we'll have Dan Titus back with us next week for our annual post-trade deadline show, Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern, on your same local channels, I guess you'd call them. But, yeah, that's enough. Thank you all for tuning in, and take care.